afternoon. Welcome back to what is one of our final sessions of the second day of our Sustainability Summit. We're going to be talking about the circular economy and reconciling capitalism with nature. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm doing this broadcast from Warsaw, and we have, in case there's any technical difficulties, we do have one of our reporters on standby in Brussels who can smoothly step in if there are any breakdowns in the link. Don't hesitate to submit your questions via the Swapcard app under the box entitled Questions. I'd like to invite the guests of my panel. We've got Virginia Sinkevicius, who is the EU Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. Jan Heetema, who's an MEP with Renew Europe from the Netherlands. Martin Brudemuller, who's the president of CEFIC, the chemicals lobby, and Jocelyn Berrois, who is the executive lead institutions, governments and cities with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I'd like to begin with a question to all of the panelists. There's a lot of talk about the pandemic recovery program. We heard a lot about here, especially from Warsaw, where I am right now, which is blocking the budget at the moment. What's the if everybody could just sort of quickly respond? What's the role of the circular economy in the pandemic recovery? Is there any link between the two? And maybe I could start with Virginia, if you could make the link, if there is one, between those two.
Sure. First of all, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having me. Currently, I think this moment is quite unprecedented. We face a massive health crisis and a huge economic crisis against the backdrop of accelerating crisis for our climate and our environment. So it's, I think, an ideal moment to be bold, to be ambitious, and to solve all these crises at the same time by building for the future. And that means by going green, going digital and moving fast. And the people who move fast on this will reap the greatest long-term advantage. So here comes the strategic autonomy, which is all about the resilience, which we need to build. And when you diversify supply chains and keep valuable resources in the economy for longer, you reduce your dependence on imports. We could do a lot more with better recycling, and that's why we want extractive and processing companies to put circularity at the heart of their processes and of their design. The Commission is funding projects along these lines under Horizon Europe, the research and innovation program. Of course, there will be always a place for global partnership. There are a number of materials that we simply do not have in Europe. And to be honest, I do not think so it's possible to build the walls and live in Europe only on our own resources, but there will be advantages and place to boosting resilience and act to ensure security of supply in strategic areas. And all that can be achieved with the Circular Economy Action Plan at the heart of the recovery.
Great, thanks very much. Jan, if you don't mind responding, there are some doubters who sort of see, I guess, the whole circular economy issue as a distraction from the more pressing need to rescue the economy, that this is something which sort of diverts from that. Is there anything to that, or does it actually make economic sense to link the circular economy with the pandemic recovery?
So yeah, first of all, I understand the worries, especially on the short term. We should do our utmost that we prevent that businesses go bankrupt, and in that sense also consequence that we have a high unemployment rate. But for the long run, I think the only way for the European Union to remain competitive in this world is with the circular economy. We're not a continent with a great amount of resources or low wages, but we make that up with our knowledge and innovation power. So I believe that if we scale up to a circular economy, it would be very beneficial for the European Union, economic-wise.
Great, thanks very much. Martin.
Well, I mean, first of all, let me say, I think no one really needed COVID, and certainly not the economic negative effect. It is jeopardizing a lot of structures. But on the other hand, I mean, by now having the funds, which I think help very much also Europe to overall get more united. I think we can connect the long term and the short term, because we have now a funding which is thought to basically recover. And that means we can take a little bit of different path in recovering, not to totally completely build the old structures, but actually embark on what the Green Deal actually proposes, which is anyway the most ambitious, I think, governmental plan we have ever seen anywhere in the world. And as the commissioner said, I mean, it's a multi-dimensional change. I think we will talk later more in detail. I mean, circular economy makes a lot of sense. And I think now using the funds from the recovery funds to connect them with the inevitable we have anyway to do gives us actually more money to do that transformation and even embarking faster. So I think we should make something positive out of a negative situation. And in that respect, I think things come together.
Great, thanks very much. Justin, do you see that, as all the other speakers have said, that they see a link between the economy and the need for a circular economy initiative?
Yeah, very much so. Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists who've laid out really important points. What's really interesting to look at is the fact that the call for a system reset and for a circular economy that preserves and circulates the value in the economy predates the pandemic, actually. So the fact that it was on the agenda and is still on the agenda and has been forcefully supported by President von der Leyen, Vice President Timmermans, and of course Commissioner Sinkevičius, is something really to be looked at in detail and say, if there is such a support, it is because we're looking at a systemic shift. It's a value creation process. It is about how do we derive value in the future, and the Commissioner rightly said about keeping the value in the economy, those materials, those products in use for longer and making the most of what we have in the system. It is, of course, a systemic shift that will take a lot of consultation between all the stakeholders. But what policymakers can do, of course, is first of all set a really strict and really clear direction of travel, and a common one in the co-creation process, fostering the collaboration with all the stakeholders and the value chain. But it's also about shaping the incentives to enable a circular low carbon economy and unlocking the investment opportunities that are present in the system. We've looked at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation at a set of 5 sectors and 10 economic opportunities in the face of COVID, addressing both short-term concerns and long-term resilient opportunities. And what is striking is that in every single case, the circulation of materials and value and keeping those products in the systems, preserving that value and addressing the brittleness of the global value chains is one of the core components. So it's about resale models, it's about remanufacturing opportunities, it's about everything that displaces the need for additional virgin materials, which of course in turn is conducive to the climate ambition that the Green Deal has set itself. So it's a way to combine both agendas.
Great, thanks very much. Seeing as we have some chemicals people here, I'd like to maybe start with the role that chemical recycling plays in the circular economy plan. And Martin, maybe you could just sort of walk us through what is chemicals recycling and what role does it play and how is it supposed to work? I mean, what is the value of what you're proposing?
I mean, first of all, I think if we have the ambitions with circular economy to come true, also with the quota, we have to run in a cycle. I think we have to be technology open. We have to use all the opportunities to get that up quickly. Mechanical recycling is the most established system. It had, I think, loops that work. But let's also be very clear that the differentiation and the sophistication in plastic materials, which contributes a lot of value to the society. Just think about food preservation, multi-layer foils that actually contribute really a lot. These materials you cannot mechanically recycle, and I think that is why the chemical recycling is an additional method that brings also the quota up for recycling material. It has also a lot of advantages because when you are in the mechanical recycling and you go through several loops, you usually lose a lot of the quality and the properties of the recycled materials. With the chemical recycling, you basically go through a thermal processes where you basically cut the long chains of the polymers into small building blocks. You can purify these materials, and then you can use them as a raw material in the existing plants. And I think this is also part of a sustainability, because actually chemical industry in a Verbund like we, for example, run in BASF, you don't have to build new plants. You can basically replace existing raw materials. And I think this is a very important part of sustainability and that means it's a drop-in solution. And I would clearly say, I know that the discussion sometimes goes that chemical recycling is replacing mechanical. That's not the intention. We have so many materials which after the mechanical recycling and the selection, the proper selection, can then be used in the chemical recycling. And the good thing is with this, you actually get all the time back from this material virtual material. That means the property also for high sophisticated polymeric system are always the same, like virgin materials. And I think for many applications, this is a very important thing. So we have embarked on that for a longer time already, but let's be also very clear, economically, that was not an interesting action. And also from the regulation part, I was also not supporting that. So now I think we have the chance to bring this together, technology, also rules, and also very much regulation. And I have a real pledge that if we go forward and we want to make this successful, also an important successful part of the Green Deal, we have to think innovation, the way how industry invests, plus the regulation, to be working very well with each other together. Because at the very end, we don't want us to fail. We all want to make the Green Deal working, and certainly the circular economy part of that. So I think we need a new approach here, and for that reason, it is an additional method that allows us quickly to come up with the circular quota.
How does the price equation work? I mean, does that are you able to compete effectively with the price of virgin raw materials, or do you need subsidies to make it all work? Or I mean, because I do hear a lot of that it's simply unattractive economically.
It is usually, from today's point of view, it's not totally competitive, but I would say the gap is closing. And also by the fact that our customers increasingly demand that. They ask low CO2 products, and they also want to raise the circular. We have also to say at the very end in the business model, also for the customer, this has a certain price. And I think this has to, at the very end, to drive the equation. That's an additional value. Regulation drives it. Society wants to have it. Politicians want to have it. And for that reason, I think we will move into a new balanced system. So I would say everyone has to carry part of that. But that is also why I said that all the activities have to go together. But it is definitely not yet the same like virgin material, but the gap is closing.
Great, thanks very much. Virginius, the NGOs have been calling on the Commission to come up with a framework for chemicals recycling. From what I've seen, the Commission is so far only saying that it will explore the potential of doing that. Martin was pretty clear that he's looking for regulatory and other assistance to make this more viable. Should we expect to hear more from the Commission on this?
Absolutely. I would say that Commission made a first step by putting forward the sustainable chemical strategy, and Martin very rightfully so said regards that circular economy action plan and chemical strategy for sustainability, they can't work one without another, because simply you can't close the circle. They are both concerned with, ensuring that products are safe and sustainable by design. And for circular economy that really closes the loop, we need non-toxic cycles, and that means, of course, addressing presence of hazardous chemical in products through their life cycles, from conception till the wastage. And the chemical strategy foresees a number of actions in this area. As a first step, we need better information on the chemical composition of products to be transmitted through the supply chain and to consumers and waste operators. This will, of course, ensure informed choices, but also proper separate collection of waste and treatment of hazardous materials for safety of secondary materials. On the product level, this means designing products to minimize the presence of substances of concern for health and the environment. And to achieve this, we need to introduce requirements which we can do as part of our sustainable product policy initiative. So eliminating the use of most harmful chemicals will also be part of our regulatory work under REACH and sectoral legislation. Obviously, there are processes and products that will still need the use of some harmful chemicals, where their use provide essential features for society, such as for health or safety applications, and where less harmful alternatives do not yet exist. Nevertheless, for many products and applications, we see retailers, manufacturer, and other downstream chemicals users that are already raising the bar and actively seeking to substitute harmful chemicals by combining support for innovation for the design of safer chemicals and, of course, regulatory measures to eliminate the use of most harmful ones. The chemical strategy aims at accelerating the transition to deliver more sustainable products and clean material cycles in the end of the day.
Great, thanks very much. Jan, you're the rapporteur on the Parliament's version of this file. On the political side of things, how does the version that you're working on differ from the Commission's proposal? And what do you foresee that when the countries tackle this, do you foresee that it'll go through relatively smoothly, or is there going to be some friction in getting this through?
So first of all, our purpose of the report of the Parliament is really, first of all, to give a mandate to the Commission to back up what the strategy is saying, and we're doing that. On the other hand, we go also a little bit further and want to show more ambition in this, that it's absolutely now time to act. We spend a lot of money in research, but now it's really the moment to act in the scaling up of a circular economy. So that's one. And the things that we are thinking of is, for example, setting a target for resource efficiency, but also a European target for resource use. And some of the member states in the European Union do already have such a strategy. For example, my own country, the Netherlands, has the ambition to halve the amount of resources used, so virgin materials, in 2030. It's quite ambitious, but I think it would be good if not only single member states, but also the European Union set such a target. And I think for a lot of businesses, you see that a lot can be done. A lot of businesses are willing to do so, but we miss a concrete legislative framework, and that is so necessary at this moment now.
Great, thanks very much. Do you see, are there particular areas of Europe or countries that are that have issues with this? I mean, we do see that certainly when it comes to emissions and to the broader Green Deal, that there are some regions which are slightly more skeptical. They have higher costs associated with it. Is there a similar breakdown when it comes to this area?
And therefore, it's also very necessary to look on the challenges, so to say, so the barriers why we cannot scale up at this moment the circular economy, even if theoretically it's possible also for those other regions in the European Union. And indeed, it was mentioned already, competition between virgin materials and secondary raw materials. And what we, for example, mentioned in our report, but also in the European Commission strategy, is trying to get some sort of a level playing field there. And you can do it in different ways. You can do it with policy. So we also indeed advocating for a mandatory content of recycled material in products or recyclable materials in the content. So it's really policy driven, for example, because by the eco-design directive. But there are many other tools. So for example, public procurement in some sectors is very important. For example, in the construction sector. Extended producer responsibility and extension of this would be great. But also, and that was mentioned by a previous speaker as well, try to link it much more on, for example, carbon legislation, so that you somehow can get carbon rewards buying being more circular, or maybe get a reward for being more circular, and in that way have a less impact on the biodiversity. Because I think even 90% of the biodiversity loss is due to the virgin materials and not to the secondary raw materials. So we have to be clever in that sense to bridge that gap and to come forward with a level playing field between virgin and secondary, or even get a plus for secondary.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to take one of the questions that we've just received, and I guess their issue is that there's a lot of discussion so far is related to recycling, and the question is, should there be much more focus on waste prevention as the first step in the circular economy? Maybe Virginius, would you be able to answer that?
Sure. I wouldn't agree on that, probably because we're discussing the circular economy action plan at the moment. But if the general topic would be zero pollution ambition, toxic-free environment, we of course would be first of all discussing waste prevention, and that goes without saying in Commission's key legislation, that first of all we're speaking about the waste prevention. Would it be chemical strategy again? Would it be zero pollution ambition, which we're going to introduce in 2021? Again, major step, of course, is waste prevention from different sources and tackling it at the source. Nevertheless, of course, we cannot forget that waste is still going to be to happen, and it's, I think, crucial to know what's next, what we're going to do when waste happens. Clearly, we have an issue when we export waste, and I hope that most of the speakers will also agree that it's exported possibilities. And with the circular economy action plan, we actually want to turn that around. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that Commission is facing away from waste prevention. That always comes as a first matter.
Great, thanks very much. And we've got a question for Jan as well. What are the key parts in your draft report that you would like the Commission to take on board when making legislation next year to help circular front runners?
Maybe what is very important is prevention. So we in our report really focus on prevention there, so that, for example, products are more durable, can be reused, but also the design phase is crucially important. 80% of the environmental impact of products is determined by the design phase. So we have to emphasize a lot on that. So prevention is indeed key. So that's a little bit in a response to the previous speaker. Yeah, and then the second question, I think that is, especially also for me as a liberal group, a very interesting question. And I don't have a very clear answer. I don't have a silver bullet to this. But I think it's very important that we don't only punish, for example, the ones that are lagging behind or are not doing the right thing, or not doing anything on circular. No, we should do the opposite. We should really stimulate and promote the enablers, the ones that are doing more the front runners. We should in some way stimulate it to do so. So we are thinking also on maybe market-based instruments in a way that they can find some benefits in this. And I mentioned already, for example, that CO2 reward. I think that would be a great enabler or a great stimulus for the front runners there. And what is not so much discussed is that you see in existing legislation a lot of conservatism. For example, biomass, you even get in some member states some subsidies to incinerate them. However, it could be a very usable source of secondary raw materials. So we have to rethink about that more.
And this will be a question to anybody who wants on the panel. It's something that we've written about a fair bit as well. Is obviously when China stopped accepting most waste imports, this sort of created a knock-on effect. We had a story out of Turkey that Turkey is now a huge importer of European waste. we hear stories of European waste, untreated waste, going to African countries as well, where it's not properly recycled. We had a story out of Italy where organized crime is filling warehouses or burning waste and abandoning it, and you see waste shipments moving from Western to Central Europe as well. How can this whole initiative work without this sort of squeeze effect of a lot of this material going onto the black market and then actually being more dangerous than it would be otherwise? Justin, I saw that you were ready to go on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it really begs the question of what upstream measures are taken in order to look at the type and the volume of feedstock that we put on the market. When it comes to plastic, our approach is really threefold. Is say we eliminate the plastic we don't need, we innovate in order to get the right materials in cycle that can cycle, and we also look at reuse as a strategy to preserve that value. So the WTO has looked at this specific question of the circular economy through the lens, I think it's fair to say that, of the Chinese ban, what they call the national sword policy, which had a massive impact. And actually, it was a political figure, I'll pay tribute to you guys here, that came out and that showed that in less than a year, the exports of plastic waste from Europe to China fell from 165,000 tons a month to just 12. So in less than a year. And of course, that either sits somewhere or goes somewhere. And the part that sits somewhere, which is about 50% when it comes to Europe, according to the OECD, the rest is exported, means that we either offshore the problem and send it to countries that have even less of an infrastructure to deal with it, downstream infrastructure, or that we are left with a stack of problematic and potentially dangerous and hazardous chemical materials that sit there. Should that question the upstream practices? Of course it should. It's about the design of the product, the type of polymers that we put on the market, and the volume. Do we really need all this? When there is no a way to throw it anymore, when a way fights back, that should really impact the upstream strategies.
See, the Martin wants to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should look on this whole thing very holistically and also do an impact assessment, because I mean, everything starts, first of all, with the use phase of this polymeric material and plastics. We should not forget they generate a lot of wealth, and they are in many applications the by far best solution. You would be surprised if you take alternative materials from plastics, how much more CO2 that, for example, means. So I think that is the use case, and I agree that this is innovation. You can things always make better. So then you have to close the loop at the very end, and I think that means the innovation for the application and for contribution to the people should increase. When we close the loop, that means, in my eyes also, if Europe is serious about the circular economy, it cannot be that we export waste. We have to take care about our own waste here. But what is also a little bit in the discussion in the moment, because of the plastic waste, and this is an awful fact all over the world, that we mix a little bit, that plastic waste means also plastic material as such is bad. I think we have to be responsible with it. And that means we have to take care about what this society uses and how we reuse that. And I think landfill is a stupid usage, because you don't use the value anymore. And on the other hand, we have to really also take the waste serious, the waste part serious. And for example, we have founded with others the Alliance to End Plastic Waste to find solutions. But we have also to be very clear that part of that holistic view is also industry structures. Yes, we have maybe the best collection systems in Europe, but they're everything else than perfect. And if we want to achieve something until 2030, and also having the capacities to recycle everything here in Europe, we have to be aware for the industry that is not a long term, because if an investment cycle is several years between decision and taking plants into operations. So we have to be very quick. And I come back to what I said earlier. We have to agree on regulations and on clear targets, not only in the altitude of 15 kilometers, how nice is everything, but we have now to lend, to really talk about how we are going to do that. How is it working? What has priority? And that includes then also waste exports, which I think very clearly have to disappear.
But as part of the the effort should also be on the part of industry. That, for example, industry should stop designing consumer products with different mixes of plastics, which make it impossible or very difficult and expensive to recycle. So you may have to completely rethink how you do things and perhaps package them in entirely different ways, ostensibly, I guess, slightly less attractive ways, in order to have that better ability to reuse and recycle afterwards.
Look, that is not totally true if you take the chemical recycling. Because I mean, I made this example of, for example, foils to protect food. You have systems today where you can keep food much longer, so much less food is destroyed and cannot be used by people. So should you abandon the foil because it's a multi-product system? No, I think you should use it, but you should close the loop. That is, for example, a product that is not for mechanical recycling, but you can very well handle it as chemical recycling. So we have to design the waste. Yes, we have also to design products, but we have also to design the whole waste stream. There are much better technologies to detect in the mixed waste the materials so that we can select them in a way where we have multi-systems that go for the chemical way, where we have pure systems that go for the mechanical way. So I think we should also not lose the innovation part in more complex systems, because I think what we also don't want to catapult us back in the Stone Age.
Thanks. We actually had a special report a few weeks ago, which we entitled The Recycling Myth, which looked at some of the huge difficulties, economic and technological, that arise with recycling, and that it's a lot more difficult than people think when they're putting their recycling out on the curb, that it's actually, it's not an open and shut case. That leads to an emphasis that some people are trying to do, which is to press people to rethink how they consume from the beginning, so that you don't create the waste in the first place. And that there was an own report in Parliament on that, and it came under quite strong attack as well, that it was sort of undermining, I guess, our capitalist economy by deeply questioning the need to consume at the level that we're consuming now. Jan, do you mind addressing that?
Yeah, sure. No, I mentioned it already a little bit. We should indeed focus on that first before speaking about circularity and the problems there. And I think we indeed should have a debate on should we be, as consumer, own a car, or indeed have a materialistic society, or can we indeed go to more like a lease economy, so to say? And you see that younger generations are much more willing to do so, and you see a lot of developments there. And I think we have to think about that. And second, what we have to think about is that you also, try to make it maybe with legislation. Focus on the design phase there as well, that you make products that are more durable, but especially also better capable of being reused. Maybe the whole product being reused, or some components. It doesn't make any sense, for example, that you have a camera in a mobile phone that you have to dismantle completely. Maybe you can indeed reuse that camera in a new mobile phone, things like this. So I think we should have such a discussion in the European Union as well. And that's therefore we also in the Parliament asking for resource use targets.
Thanks. That leads me to my next question, which is there's also a push to enhance repairability, to make people hold on to, whether it's our smartphone or our car or microwave or whatever, for much longer, that you make it easier to fix, easier to access the spare parts. That again shifts the emphasis. Jocelyn, does that undermine part of our economic model as well? If we switch to simply owning articles for 15 years instead of 3, what does that do for the long-term model on which our economies are based?
Well, if the premise is that the economic dynamism is going to be precluded on throughput and sales of volume, and a linear model which takes something out of the ground, creates a product and then consumers discards it, and then we go back to the whole cycle. Yes, of course, but that's hardly the question. The idea is to say, how can we keep that value in the system? How can we have maintenance system, refurbishment system, remanufacturing system that do create activity in themselves? This is an important part of what the future economy could look like. It's about making sure that we preserve that value and we create that value by building capital rather than depleting finite resources. So if you look at the model of the renovation wave that the European Commission is pushing hard, and rightly so, for buildings, you could say by having those circular economy models that look at the use phase, how can we utilize empty office spaces? How can we make better use of what we have in the system? And how can we maintain design for modularity to make sure that instead of demolishing buildings, we deconstruct and repurpose them? All of that is conducive to more activity. It's a different sort of activity. It's not sales of volume, but it's maintenance, preservation of value, and building of economic, social, and at the end of the day, environmental capital as well.
Great, thanks very much. We've talked a fair bit about waste. I'd like to ask Virginius, should there be an initiative on the part of national governments and the EU to make it easier to move waste around in the EU as a way of precluding some of this from being unusable and getting illegally exported? That it should be simply easier to shift things around within the bloc, and that there should be some sort of overarching regulatory framework to make that work better.
Thank you for the question. We are exploring it, but probably major and first concern is, of course, stopping waste exports outside the EU. On the other hand, we also have to build circular economy capacities among member states as well. And as one of the speakers mentioned, we have the most ambitious ones who already are quite a lot advanced on many technologies, on different sectors, including, for example, textiles or buildings or construction, and others who are still lagging behind. So here is also an issue to solve that. If they will be able to actually freely move around, that actually those ambitious ones will grow fast, and then we have those less ambitious ones who will be just, exporting it out of the country and not really trying to do anything with that, and the gap between them will only grow within the union as well. So probably first is, of course, for us is the solution to stop exporting it, because it's again, we're exporting our possibilities, we're exporting innovation growth, but also it's usually ends up that waste usually ends up very badly treated. So we do environmental damage elsewhere, but actually, overall we live on one same planet. And secondly, of course, building those capacities within member states is important, because at the end of the day, all of them generate waste, and we have to find a way to treat that waste, prevent, treat, and of course, such word like landfills should be a word of past.
How do you, and I'll ask this sort of more broadly for the panel as well, how do you ensure that countries move in tandem, that you don't have more ambitious, Virginius, as you mentioned, there's varying levels of ambition between countries, more ambitious countries setting rules, setting chemicals regulations, for example, France on titanium dioxide, which then leads to worries that this undermines the single market, that you end up creating different regulatory structures. You make it difficult to trade across the EU as countries are driven by their own internal political pressures to make such changes. Martin, I saw that you'd like to say something on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like to say all these ideas which are coming from Brussels on a European level, as much of that should be also European solutions. Because I think we have also the issue that we have, if we want to compete with the US and with China, and I think we all agree on that, we have to have a more European strength again. So for that reason, I warn only if all that is translated into national regulation, that doesn't help us, because also some of the small countries, if they have too small structures, why shouldn't they export their waste and combine it with other countries, and one specialized on that and the other one specializes on that? So I really urge that we have European solutions. Let me give you another example, which is the CO2 topic, where we will only be able to apply to the reduction targets if we have masses of renewable energy. So, but there are parts in Europe where there is no industry, but fantastic conditions for wind and solar. And then these areas have to produce the renewable energy that is consumed somewhere else. I think we have a unique opportunities by this new framework and these new ambitions we generate to really find European solutions which are beyond national borders. I think that bring us much closer together. That is also an economic program. You can also, by doing this, support those areas that are structurally weak. And with this, I think we have a huge opportunity. So if we don't think it European and translate everything into national, I'm very much worried that Europe gets the strength we all wanted to see.
Great, thanks very much. Justin, I'd like to ask you, oh, sorry, Jan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, please, if I can. There was a little bit of a reaction towards the commissioner. I think what is crucially important is to look at the end of waste criteria. When is something waste and when is it available secondary raw materials? And I think the Commission has has the power to do so, has the mandate via implementing acts. And I think the businesses are very much waiting for that to get some clarity on this. And indeed, closing and if you have those criteria, you have a single market for those single secondary raw materials. So that is crucially important that we have as soon as possible those end of waste criteria.
Virginius, is that something that's going to happen?
Oh, I think that's inevitably part. One is, of course, we should think of end of cycle. Another part is, of course, which we must address is designing, because again, a lot of that waste is pre-designed, and if we will be just running behind it and thinking how we going to treat end of life of one or the other product, that's also not going to work. So it's the combination of both. And firstly, of course, is designing, but that's the part which is industrial. But for the industry, we also touched upon in this discussion, and I think important part is, of course, our own behavior on the consumption. And you also asked the question about our economy, how it's going to work if the consumption is going to decrease, if we're going to consume one or the other product longer. So that's the combination which can only work out if we truly want to achieve our 2030 and then later 2050 goals.
Thanks very much. You actually brought up something which I wanted to address to all the panel members. You mentioned our own behavior, and I'd like to, as our panel draws to a close, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, in light of this greater effort for the circular economy and this pressure to rethink the way that we consume, the way that we buy, the way that we use products, can each of you name a few changes that have happened in your own behavior and what you buy and what you sell, thanks to the circular economy? Maybe Justin, I could start with you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think it's really important to highlight the fact that this is a systemic issue, and as individual citizens, and I don't believe actually that going too far down the path of consumerism is very useful here. As individuals, we're way more than that. We want to access the service that a product gives us. We don't want to consume it per se. It's a terminology thing, but it's actually quite important. But the power of action is limited when you're in a system that actually doesn't give you those options. So one of the important ideas is how can we, of course, demand and shift the market towards more circular economy solutions to emerge at scale? How do we make the industrial actors realize the opportunity of the circular economy, act on it, and be enabled by the right policy framework to bring those solutions to the market? Because if we're going to try and shift a really strongly embedded system simply by small behavioral change, which are very important at the individual level, but it calls for a bigger revamp of the system. Now, if you want one specific example.
Yes, exactly. Let's get concrete with you. I know that individually, of course, we can't change the world, but we can do a little bit. So what have you done?
One thing that really bugs me, is headphones. Headphones are really nice. When they have a cable, the cable always breaks. Buy headphones that have a detachable cable. You don't have to throw away the whole set at the end of use.
I'm saving on that as well. So, Martin, how are you? Yes?
If you don't mind me saying, you're saving on the cable, but the mini batteries in your AirPods can't actually be accessed. So that's another issue altogether.
Always a way to make people feel bad about their purchases.
No, that's not what I meant. It's design.
Yeah, I
exactly.
mean, it's
Martin, how are you making the world a slightly better place?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar answer here. I mean, you have some choices which you do. I mean, if I, for example, think about the way I eat today, I look much more on the food quality. I buy much more on open markets, which means also to a certain extent less packaging, or reaching out to another area which is now not circular, but which is driving an electrical car, where, by the way, the concept is also to recycle stuff. My company is in battery recycling. So I look that you can do and close the loops. So I think you do that. But I think I would also like to say we cannot just launch this to the individual consumer and say, you have to now change your behavior, because actually the system partially doesn't allow you to do that. There are certain offerings which is maybe a little bit worse or a little bit better, but it's not a fundamental change. I think we really have to come up with these changes by design. And I mean, my industry, which is an innovation-driven industry and which is catering a lot of materials in all kinds of value chains, we want to drive that with innovation. And then it has to come together, what we said, with regulation, and then really change the system. And with this, I think we also educate simply the consumers by different choices. And I think innovation is the key here. And as the commissioner used that, I really want to emphasize this. Safe and sustainable by design, also for chemical products, to find better solution is something which is great for my industry. We can very much live with that one, and with this drive also and educate consumers to buy differently in future.
Super, thank you very much. Jan, what personal things are you doing to make the world a little bit better place?
What was really an eye-opener for me when working on this topic as a rapporteur was the impact, CO2 impact, environmental impact of textiles and of clothing. That was huge. I did not know that. And also I did not know how much, how you say, how people are always buying new clothes, and a lot of clothes are not even used. And now I see it to myself, to the wardrobe that I have back home. And I'm like, yeah, I do the same. So I'm much more conscious in buying new clothes, for example, because they're in sale or there's a new mode. I'm very much concerned with that. And maybe that's why I'm also the only one here without wearing a suit today. I'm not sure about that.
This is the first shirt that I've worn in months, so I don't know if I'm a bad guy on that. Virginius, what are you doing in your own life that's a bit more circular?
I go first with disagreement a little bit about the individual approach. I think individual approach is extremely important because it increases then society's understanding and acceptance of what happens. And when we introduce chemical strategy for sustainability, or we introduce the circular economy action plan, it is important that actually society would be following these trends, and that is going to be, of course, easier for businesses to go ahead. But I'm I start with very simple thing. I always use a mask which is reusable and not a single one. But for Jan, I have a very good advice which I've been user for many years now. My wife is even better, of course. Is actually Vinted, a great app where which is basically created the secondary market of clothing, which you can easily sell and resell and so on, and I strongly invite you to use it. And of course, last but not least, I truly enjoy bike sharing and scooter sharing when I have a chance. Around the EU institutions, I think it's not only circular, but it's also cleans our air. So strongly encourage you when the weather is going to be good, all to use it. It all starts from us, not from the top of the government, but bottom-up approach, which actually changes.
Super. Thank you very much. Here's my POLITICO reusable face mask as well. So thank you to all the panelists for taking part. And I'll just give the results of the poll, which was presented by Cefic. The question was, what would be the biggest policy driver of a circular economy in Europe? And 21% said to create a level playing field for recycling methods. 16% said to increase transparency and develop uniform standards for recycled content. 21% said establish an open market for secondary raw materials in the EU. 42% said all of the above, and I'm assuming that those people straddling all the divides are probably from within our Brussels bubble, who are very good at fudging answers. Again, thank you to all of the panelists, and we're going to move to our next session, which is a spotlight discussion on the future of sustainable packaging, which will be led by Elina Schart, and that starts in 10 minutes' time. So don't go away, and we'll be right back. Thank you.